My body and mind are exhausted from childcare, and this is when I need Charles's help the most. I desperately tried to stop Charles. I'm at my breaking point listening to Barbara cry every night. Besides, isn't raising kids a mother's job? I can do whatever I want. Charles said this so casually. How could you, going on a trip to Korea with your sisters at such a tough time? I'm going to have fun without the family or wife. Charles laughed and left with his bags. I tried to follow him, but Barbara's crying from the back room stopped me. I was so sad and miserable that I burst into tears. I didn't work hard into my 30s just to support a deadbeat husband like this. I wanted to build a life together with mutual support. But Charles seems to have no intention of working anymore. On top of that, he casually takes my gold card from my wallet and uses it without a second thought. I'm done being used by someone like Charles. I steeled myself and began thinking of the best way to make Charles pay. My name is Mary Williams, and I'm 34 years old. I joined a major company right after graduating and have been working there ever since. I met my husband Charles at a bar I often visited after work. He worked there as a bartender. Charles is 6 years younger than me and is currently 28. Charles is handsome and friendly, and he listened to my work complaints with genuine concern. Before I knew it, I started looking forward to going to the bar after work to see Charles. Eventually, we started dating. My parents were against our marriage. They tried to persuade me to find a man who worked at the same company. I was determined. Right after we got married, Charles helped with various household chores. Since his job started in the evening, he would do the laundry and cleaning during the day while he was at home. Mary, you're busy, so I'll cook dinner today, Charles would say, showing his consideration for my busy schedule. When I got home, the food Charles made was laid out on the table. I felt deeply grateful that I had married him. However, about 6 months into our marriage, Charles started to change. The trigger was my pay stub. One time, Charles happened to see my pay stub on the table and said, "Whoa, Mary, you make this much." Charles stared at the stub with a surprised look. I had never talked to Charles about my monthly income. I knew you were a career woman and probably made good money, but I didn't think it was this much. I'm on my feet working hard and barely making anything. Charles muttered to me with a discontented look, his hands behind his head. Then one day, Charles suddenly said to me, "I quit my job." What? I was shocked. Quitting your job without consulting me. Honestly, my earnings are nothing compared to yours, Mary, and I thought we could live off your salary. In exchange, I'll handle all the housework so you can focus fully on your job. What? I was speechless. The truth is, I hadn't been feeling well that day, and I had just confirmed my suspicion with a pregnancy test I bought at the pharmacy during work. The result was positive. I had planned to tell Charles about my pregnancy that very day. Actually, I'm pregnant. What? Charles looked completely shocked by the news. I found out today with a test. I'll probably be taking maternity leave soon, so I'm a bit worried about you quitting your job. I hesitated but shared my honest feelings with Charles. He quickly responded, "But doesn't your company provide benefits during maternity leave?" Well, yes, but... I was confused and overwhelmed. Even after I told Charles about the pregnancy, he didn't seem happy. He only kept asking how much I would get from the company each month during my maternity leave. Charles insisted, "I'll handle all the housework. When the baby is born, I'll take care of it, Mary. You just focus on bringing in your salary." It might have sounded kind, but it didn't sit right with me. I knew there was a significant income gap between us, but I never imagined I'd be in a position where I'd have to support him. I felt my trust in Charles starting to erode. A hospital test confirmed that I was indeed pregnant. Despite battling morning sickness, I worked hard up until the last possible moment before taking maternity leave. Meanwhile, Charles became a house husband, staying home all the time, but he gradually stopped doing much housework. When I came home from work, the house was a mess. Dishes piled up in the kitchen like a mountain. "Welcome back," Charles said, lying on the couch, scrolling through his phone without moving. "I'm home, Charles. What about dinner?" "I just went to the spa and ate at the dining hall there. Sorry, Mary, but you can have some frozen food." Charles said this, pointing to the fridge. Exhausted from work and starving, I didn't have the energy to argue and heated up some frozen food as he suggested. Time passed, and I eventually started my maternity leave. Once I was home all the time, Charles stopped doing anything at all. When I asked him to help more with the housework, he said, "Now that you're home too, it's not fair for me to do everything," and stormed out angrily. Despite our deteriorating relationship, the baby in my belly was thankfully growing well. Eventually, I reached my due date and gave birth to a healthy baby girl. We named her Barbara. I didn't go back to my parents' home for the birth, but my mother came to our apartment to help. I have an older sister named Maria, who is 2 years older than me. Maria is already married and lives in a condo with her husband, David. They don't have kids, and Maria is a stay-at-home wife. One day, Maria came to visit me alone at my apartment. "Congratulations on your baby, Mary." Maria brought a gift to celebrate the birth of my baby. "Wow, she's so cute." Maria happily held Barbara and gazed at her. Charles watched Maria with a grin on his face, which made me feel uncomfortable. Compared to plain, work-focused me, Maria is a stunning beauty who can captivate men. Whenever Maria visits, Charles fawns over her and sticks close to her. "It's so hot today. I'm really thirsty." When Maria said this, Charles hurried to the fridge, poured juice into a glass, and brought it to her. "Here, have some juice." "Oh, Charles, you're so thoughtful." "Thank you. I wish my husband was this considerate." Maria downed the juice in one gulp. Charles, blushing, stayed by her side. Since Barbara was born, Maria started visiting our home more frequently. Each time, Charles happily chatted and laughed with her. Meanwhile, Charles completely neglects me, even though I'm exhausted from taking care of Barbara. A few months after Barbara was born, her nighttime crying got worse. I'm so sleep-deprived, I'm barely functioning. Charles became increasingly frustrated with Barbara's constant crying. Shut up. Staying in this house all the time is driving me crazy." I felt a surge of anger towards Charles when he yelled this. "If you hate being home so much, then go get a job lately. You don't do any housework or help with Barbara at all." Charles glared at me and shot back. "We can live off your maternity leave benefits just fine, so I don't need to bust my ass working." I realized then that Charles had no intention of working anymore. He had completely turned into a deadbeat. With Barbara here and more expenses coming up, it's unacceptable for her father to be jobless, not doing any housework, and just lazing around. I shouted at Charles, full of anger. Charles silently walked towards the door. "Charles, where are you going?" "Maria's house." Charles mumbled as he put on his shoes. "What?" I was shocked. After arguing with me and storming out of the house, why would he go to Maria's place? That night, Charles texted me, "I'm staying at Maria's house tonight." When I called Maria, she laughed and said, "Don't worry about it. Every couple fights." The next day, Charles came back home. When I approached him to talk, he was busy packing something. "Charles, what are you doing?" "Packing for a trip." "A trip?" I was so stunned that I didn't know what to ask first. I've been really stressed and feeling mentally unwell lately. I told Maria about it, and she suggested we all go on a trip to clear my head. What? Where are you going? Korea. We're going to eat a lot of delicious food like barbecue. It's a 3-day trip. I was so overwhelmed by the sudden news that my head was spinning. Are you going, just the two of you? I asked in a panic. Of course not. David is coming too. Charles replied with a laugh. My body and mind are exhausted from childcare, and this is when I need your help the most. I desperately tried to stop Charles. I'm at my breaking point listening to Barbara cry every night. Besides, isn't raising kids a mother's job? I can do whatever I want. Charles said this so casually. How could you, going on a trip to Korea with your sisters at such a tough time? I'm going to have fun without the family or wife. Charles laughed and left with his bags. I tried to follow him, but Barbara's crying from the back room stopped me. I immediately called Maria. Sorry. But everyone needs a break when they're mentally stressed. Right. I checked, and there were open seats, so we got round-trip tickets. David can take 3 days off, so we're going to Korea. Oh, looks like the taxi is here to pick us up. Bye. Wait, Maria. Without listening to me, Maria hung up the phone. I was stunned for a while, but then I started to worry. Charles shouldn't have any money of his own, so how is he planning to go to Korea? I quickly checked my wallet. Gone. The gold card that should have been in my wallet was missing. My company issues gold cards to employees and covers the annual fee. That card was gone from my wallet. I called Charles's cell phone. Charles, did you take my gold card without asking? I just borrowed it for a bit while you were in the bathroom. I'm at the airport's gold card member lounge now. We're about to have some champagne. Charles responded confidently. Taking someone's card without asking is theft. I shouted angrily. Theft? I already live off your income, don't I? Using your gold card is just doing the same thing I always do. There's no need to freak out. Bye. Charles hung up the phone. Then Barbara started crying again. Unbelievable. I looked around the house, which was a mess with things scattered everywhere. I'm exhausted from taking care of Barbara all the time. Yet Charles gets to go on a trip to Korea with Maria and the others. This is ridiculous. I felt miserable and broke down in tears. Wait a minute, I'll call the card company and report the card stolen. I hurriedly looked up the contact number for the card company. No, wait, I paused and thought for a moment. Then I decided not to make the call. For the next 2 days, I'll let him use the card freely. And then, at the moment when Charles needs it most, I'll report it stolen. It was finally the 3rd day of Charles's trip to Korea. I explained the situation to the card company and had the card blocked for any further charges. Immediately, Charles called me. It seemed they had checked out of the hotel early and headed to the airport. We were in the gold card lounge at the Korean airport when security came up and kicked us out. What's going on? Charles sounded panicked. Well, Charles, you're not a gold card member. It's only natural that unqualified people get kicked out. I replied calmly. Did you block the card, Mary? Charles asked fearfully. Yes, I did. I answered shortly. You've got to be kidding. Wait, they're taking me to some interrogation room. They're grabbing my arm and dragging me away. Charles was kind enough to give me a detailed play-by-play. You were using a card that didn't belong to you. Of course, they stopped you. You can't be serious. I might not be able to get back to the US. It sounded like Charles was having all his belongings searched and undergoing various inspections. I couldn't stop laughing. According to Charles, Maria and David were also being questioned in a separate room. It turned out that Charles had paid for Maria and David's travel expenses with my gold card. I was shocked to hear this. I never imagined he would use my card for their travel expenses. Soon, Maria called me. "Mary, because of you, we're stuck at the Korean airport," Maria said accusingly. "Sis, I had no idea. I didn't know you were making me pay for your travel expenses with my gold card." Well, Charles was desperate and came to us for help, so David and I reluctantly agreed to go on this trip to Korea with him. We were just accompanying him to cheer him up, so it's only natural that his wife, Mary, pays for it. I was stunned. Maria was completely unapologetic. It seemed she had also been using my card for all their shopping and food expenses in Korea. "Mary, make the card usable again immediately." "No." When I refused, Maria raised her voice and yelled at me. "Who does she think she is? Mary, a plain woman who only knows how to work, had a baby before me. Just make the card usable already. You workaholic. You have plenty of savings, don't you?" Maria said shocking and hurtful things to me. But this was her true feeling. Maria, being cuter and more pampered than me, had always looked down on me. She didn't like that I had a baby before she did. Suddenly, David took the phone from her. "Hello, Mary. It's David. I'm really sorry about this. Maria lied to me." "Lied?" "Yes. She told me that you begged her to take Charles on this trip to relieve his stress and that you would cover all the expenses. She said you asked us to do this as a favor to help him." I was stunned. I couldn't believe Maria had told David such outrageous lies. I planned to buy my own ticket and return to the US alone. David said firmly. In the background, I could hear Maria panicking and causing a commotion. "David, what do you mean by returning alone?" "It means exactly that. I have my own credit card and cash, and I'm buying a ticket to return to the US." "Wait, why are you leaving alone? Buy tickets for me and Charles too. Otherwise, we can't get back to the US." Maria angrily demanded from David. I could hear Charles joining in with his loud voice. "Yeah, David, please, buy our tickets too," Charles shouted, pleading with David. "No, I refuse." I was shocked to hear David's words. Sure, I was angry at Charles and Maria for using my gold card without permission. But why was David being so harsh with them? I couldn't understand. Then David addressed me directly. "Mary, please listen calmly. Charles and Maria are having an affair." "What?" I was utterly astonished by David's sudden revelation. It seemed David had been suspicious of how close Maria and Charles had become recently. One day, when David came home from work, he noticed the smell of Charles's cologne, which was unusual. The scent was even in the bedroom, making David suspicious. However, he had no concrete proof of their affair. When they invited me to join the trip to Korea, I decided to pretend I didn't suspect anything and go along to catch them in the act. Like David, I was troubled by how close Charles and Maria were. Despite my doubts about Charles, I never thought he would actually have an affair. I believed Maria wouldn't get involved with her own sister's husband. Even if Charles made a move, I thought Maria would reject him. I still trusted my sister Maria to some extent. But that trust was completely shattered. On the first night of the trip, around 3 a.m., Maria got out of bed and left the room, going straight into Charles's room across the hall. I saw it with my own eyes. Hearing David's words, I was in shock. "Maria, I pretended to be sound asleep, but as soon as the door closed, I ran to the peephole and saw you entering Charles's room. Charles welcomed you with his arm around your shoulder." David spoke with anger. "What? No way, David. You were snoring the whole time," Maria stammered. Maria, panicking, said to David, "I was pretending. I figured if I snored and acted like I was sound asleep, you'd sneak out and eventually go to Charles's room." And I was right. "No, this can't be." Maria was making excuses next to him. "Even though Charles is just a brother-in-law, He was coming over way too often. And every time you greeted him with heavy makeup and a big smile. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Don't insult me. David shouted, furious. Both Maria and Charles went silent in the face of David's anger. You came back about an hour later and calmly went to sleep next to me. Unbelievable. Cheating with your brother-in-law. And on the second night, you snuck out and returned 2 hours later. Did you think you were safe because you didn't get caught the first night? Were you awake then too, David? Maria's voice trembled. Yes, I was. I pretended to be asleep the whole time. How can you cheat with your brother-in-law on a trip with your husband, Charles? I won't forgive you either. David, wait, we were just… Charles mumbled, unable to deny anything. David then addressed me. So I'm buying my ticket back to the US and leaving them here, Mary. Is that okay with you? Of course, please do, Charles, sis. You two can live happily together in Korea. You don't need to come back to the US ever again. I said with a laugh. Charles begged. Please, Mary, just send money for the plane tickets, please. Charles, you were a bartender, right? Maybe you can get a job at the airport bar. And sis, you're great at flirting with men, so why not work as a hostess? I replied, still laughing. David returned safely to the US. He and I agreed to implement a certain plan. Both of us worked on it diligently whenever we had time. Eventually, Charles and Maria managed to get their parents to buy them plane tickets, and they returned to the US a few days later. When Charles arrived at the apartment from the airport, he called me. Mary, what's going on? I got back to the apartment, but the key doesn't work, and there's a vacant sign on the door. Charles sounded frantic. Oh, I cancelled the lease on that apartment. What? Charles was too shocked to respond. I rented that apartment in my name. I can do whatever I want with it. I calmly replied. What about my stuff? I got rid of everything. None of it was worth anything, so I couldn't even get a buyer. What are you saying? You can't be serious. Charles's voice trembled. You just went on a trip, so you have the essentials. That's enough. You can sleep outside if you need to. Sleep outside, Mary? Where are you? I'm not telling. I've moved to a new apartment, and I'm living peacefully with Barbara. I said, laughing. I'll return your gold card, please. Just meet me. Charles pleaded desperately. That card has been cancelled. There's no point in returning it. I replied coldly. I let you use the card freely to rack up debt for you after the divorce. Divorce? Debt? Yes, plus. Taking your wife's card and using it without permission for a large amount will make the court quickly agree to the divorce. Charles said, panicking. Wait, I don't want a divorce. I have no home, no money. How am I supposed to live? That's not my concern. I've decided to live my life on my own, raising Barbara. Mary, please listen. I was wrong. I apologize. I don't want a divorce. Ignoring Charles's desperate pleas, I hung up the phone. Meanwhile, Maria was also panicking about losing her home. David, where are you? I can't get into the apartment. Where am I supposed to sleep tonight? Please help me. Maria pleaded with David. I've sold that apartment. We're getting a divorce. From now on, contact me through my lawyer. Don't contact me directly anymore. Goodbye. Wait, David, please. Charles forced me into it. I had no choice. I only love you. Really? You seemed pretty happy going into his room. You talked to Charles the whole trip. Do you know how miserable that made me feel? I don't want to speak to someone as awful as you. After that, David blocked her calls, leaving Maria with no way to contact him. Thus, when Charles and Maria returned from Korea, they found themselves wandering the streets with their travel bags and no home. Later, with the help of my lawyer, I divorced Charles. I demanded compensation from Charles and Maria. Charles was also ordered to repay all the money he spent using my card. David divorced Maria and demanded compensation from both Charles and Maria. Charles and Maria, now abandoned by their spouses, found a place to live together. It was a run-down apartment about 40 years old. Charles wandered around looking for a job but had a hard time finding stable employment. In the end, he ended up doing day labor at construction sites and moving jobs. Maria, trying to earn an income, also struggled to find work due to her long years as a housewife. Eventually, Maria started working in a hostess bar. Charles was furious, saying, "Stop working in a job where you serve men." Maria retorted, "You used to be a bartender yourself." This led to a big fight. Despite being so attracted to each other during their affair, they ended up living separately after a series of intense arguments. Both are now living miserable lives, completely worn out and with no money or hope. I gained custody of Barbara and became a single mother. My company approved my request for parental leave, allowing me to raise Barbara in a financially stable environment. When I eventually returned to work, I plan to enroll Barbara in daycare and get help from my mother to manage everything. Currently, Barbara is growing well every day. I take Barbara in her stroller to the nearby park and enjoy connecting with other moms, living a peaceful life. There are challenges, but I intend to savor this precious time with Barbara. When I go back to work, I'll strive to earn a stable income again. With that in mind, I am cherishing my days with Barbara.